So the next section, what drivers to install, have to make some decisions here as to what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Now on this machine, there is no AMD, so I'll be skipping that as I obviously can't demonstrate that. Now this laptop has got an Intel built-in GPU, and it is the i915 that I'll be using. However, the NVIDIA card is also installed there, a 940M, which is obviously going to provide better performance. And as you've seen already, the problem I've got with this is that certainly the Nouveau driver, the built-in driver in the kernel, doesn't work, or doesn't enable, sorry, the HDMI port. So I'm going to chance my luck with this and carry on down the NVIDIA route, hoping that the binary blob that gets installed from NVIDIA will enable the HDMI port to allow me to show the desktop running as it is. Now, if it doesn't work, then I'll just have to revert to the Intel and make do as best I can with that. Maybe alternatively I can take some stills or something off the desktop to show on the video. I'll have to work that out, see what happens, because I don't know what's going to happen. So I will primarily go down the NVIDIA. As I say, if that fails, I'll show going back, disabling NVIDIA, installing Intel, which should be fairly trivial actually, and booting with that. That should allow the capturing from the HDMI port off the laptop, and it should allow me to run the games and Steam and so on, although the performance might be somewhat reduced, being this is a 10-year-old laptop. So I'll have to see how it goes. So it does give some information here. It says that Intel, all the drivers to do with Intel referred to as i915, but there's another one called UVisa FP. And it says that the i915 is a collection of drivers, which it is. It covers every driver from, I think, the second or third generation onwards. So that's going back to, I can't remember now, probably late 90s, early 2000s. I can't quite remember now, but it doesn't include the original. I think it was a 740 and 860 were the first two generations. So everything since then is included. So it's the i915 when it came out, which I think is the third generation, 865, 965, etc., and everything else since then, up to the obviously the latest generations. Also bear in mind that the generation of the graphics chip doesn't mention the generation of the core chips. Obviously it's out of step because it appeared a few years before the first core chips appeared. It appeared when I think the netburst architecture is still around. So that's something to bear in mind. If somebody talks about generation, you have to make sure, are they talking about the graphics chip, the GPU generation, or the CPU generation? Because there obviously is a distinct difference. So the NVIDIA, yeah, it says a bit more unfortunate, purely because NVIDIA doesn't support open source drivers apart from their own open source kernel modules. So you get a binary blob basically, which you got to build to effectively attach or build a module to link into that blob, that binary blob. And it says the Nouveau, the built-in driver, so that's partly in the kernel and it's partly a userland driver, as well as performance. So that's the reason why people tend to go for the binary version. And it says there's other options here, but I've only used the Nouveau, and the Nouveau does work for desktop stuff, but you wouldn't want to use it for gaming, which is what this is obviously all about. But yeah, so just to reiterate, the problems I've been having are not with getting the drivers working. The problem is with getting my screen grabber to work in the HDMI port because it doesn't get enabled by the Nouveau driver in the kernel. And that's the problem I've got, is to demonstrate it. But actually working on the built-in screen of the laptop, both the NVIDIA and the Intel work fine. There's not an issue. So all these options will needed to be set depending on obviously what hardware you've got. So obviously I haven't enabled any of the AMD stuff. However, I have enabled the Nouveau and Intel options. I can't remember if I've enabled the software drivers, these two here. However, to enable or disable one or the other of these, I'll just be using the blacklisting and the modules. So currently, to get the Intel graphics card working, not only did I have to compile it in as well as the NVIDIA, which I didn't have originally, I've also blacklisted Nouveau, so the Nouveau driver doesn't get initialized when the machine's booted. So currently, this machine has got the i915 driver active. I'm not sure if I could show that, can I? Yeah, there it is, they're active, i915, and you can see there's no mention of NVIDIA. However, if I, Nouveau, if I search in lib modules for name Nouveau, you can see that there are drivers there, and all I've done is blacklisted the Nouveau as well as the NVIDIA frame buffer device driver as well. So I think by default these two options will allow the NVIDIA driver to work straight away. So what it means is, as soon as I've installed the NVIDIA driver, I'll have to blacklist i915 to ensure that the NVIDIA driver is the only graphics driver, so there's no contention or mistake as to which driver I'm using. So I'll add in the blacklist i915 to disable the Intel driver at boot, thus leaving only the NVIDIA driver. And like I say, I just have to take it from there to see what happens, to see how successful that is on the port, on the HDMI port, as to whether I can capture that to put on the videos or not. So as I say, these options are already set. Again, I can double check that to ensure I'm not mistaken. So I'll grep the Linux kernel. In fact, I should use the running one. Now, I don't think normally I enable an option in the kernel to expose the config, and I haven't this time. There's an option to expose the configuration file. It gets saved with the kernel, and then another option will expose it as config.gz in the proc virtual file system, but I obviously haven't done that. So what I'm going to do is to mount the boot and just grep the config file that's there. I mean, this should be the same as the one that's in the sources, but I just thought I'd do it differently this time. So that's the file I want to grep on, and I want to look for i915. So you can see it's set as a module, which allows me to blacklist it. That's the sound driver. I wonder if that means the sound will go through the HDMI ports, possibly, being that's pointing at the graphics card. That's a possibility. But as I said before, when I'm doing the sound drivers, I'm not particularly bothered about the sound. You can still have a working and usable machine without sound. Even though this is a gaming machine, it's not important to demonstrate that for this video, this series of videos. So that's the i915, and I'll just look for the Nouveau. And you can see, again, it's set as a module, which, as you can also see back here, that I've blacklisted. So that is that. So that's all good. As I don't think I've enabled these, which is something I would have done had I had problems with these two other drivers, just to at least get something working. No, that one's not set. And I'm not doing a virtual environment, so I'm not bothered about that one. Right, that's just about the software driver. So the firmware for ATI, so I'm not going to do that. i915 firmware. So I may have to install some firmware, which will be in the message log here, ACPI. Yes, there's, alright, looks like it just enables power management. So there is some firmware to download for the Intel driver, but as I say, I'm hoping not to have to rely on that anyway. So yes, I would need to read this to download the firmware. Decline. Oh, that looks like that's about, what is this? Further details. Okay, I thought in the GLFS book there was information about Intel. Let's do microcode. Might be easier to use the contents actually. Let's have a look at this. Okay, looks like there's only information on input drivers now. Oh, so they must have been DDX drivers. So there may be something to look at. So it's probably more appropriate to the DDX to older versions of the Intel card, graphics card. Yeah, doesn't look like there's any information about installing the driver there anymore. There may be a bit on firmware actually, thinking about it. Yeah, there is. Yeah, there's information about graphics card firmware, so it looks similar to what's in the GLFS book actually. So yeah, there's information there about installing firmware. So if it comes to that, I can demonstrate that. But as I say, I'm hoping to get the NVIDIA card working because it will give far better performance. Some NVIDIA GPUs from Kepler onwards, including RTX and GTX 9 series, require firmware signed by NVIDIA. So that's how to get the firmware there. And from Tesla to Kepler, there's extra firmware there. It says they can be extracted from an NVIDIA run file. So I can't remember what technology the driver is that I've got for this, but whichever one of these boxes here of commands I ran, I just copied and pasted it and retrieved, if I can spot it, that file there, that NVIDIA Linux 570. So it looks like the most recent version, or fairly recent. So it's probably this top one I've used. In fact, yes, it's a 940M, so it's this top one here. It comes under this bit here. Yeah, it describes there what to do to fetch it. Once you found what you need, look up in whence and then make the necessary symlinks. If you can't find your GPU, either it doesn't need firmware or the firmware has not been released yet. So that's how to get hold of the correct version of the NVIDIA driver. So let's start off with building the packages in this section to do with the graphics drivers. And there's quite a lot to build here, and there's some packages that do take quite a time to complete. So let's crack on. So PCI utils is a useful tool to have at any time, I think, if you're dealing with drivers and hardware, just to find out information about the hardware on the PCI bus. So I need to become root to install that, and that's done. So I've now got LSPCI, which gives some basic information about the hardware on the machine, and you can see there it tells me not only the model but the chipset number, which you can use to look up to find the exact driver that you need, as well as the Intel driver there, Skylake GT2 HD graphics 520. So again, it tells me the model and the exact chip number, the exact version, if you like, exact model. So HW data. That's quick. And that's done. libglvnd vendor neutral dispatch layer, that stands for. So it's the library for GL graphics language vendor neutral dispatch. So let's compile and build that. Configure and build that. And install it. And we build 32 bits, so just carry on with the instructions. I'll say it's really handy that they've put all the instructions in. It means there's no ambiguity as to what we've got to do. Okay, and install that. Okay, Vulkan headers next. So strange as some of these packages do come up with Ninja no work to do, but clearly it has done something, because it does say build files have been written to the build, and we can see them there. So it's a bit unnerving. The CMake is obviously completed, but the Ninja hasn't found anything to compile. It's maybe just configuration that's done. And you can see the tests have passed 100%. So, as I say, a bit unnerving, but clearly nothing to worry about. And that's done. The package is called headers, come to think of it, so it could be that it's just text files, just header files. No actual software to compile. So that's Vulkan headers. Now we've got Vulkan loader. Oh, right, okay, I didn't change directory. Let's try that again. That's better. And install it. And we can now build for 32-bit. And install. And that's done. And move on to Spurv headers. And as it says there, the tarball will extract to something slightly different name. So another quick one, no test suite, so we just go straight to install it. And that's done. And move on to Spurv tools. And once again, the directory is different from the tarball name. Okay, it's done, and now we're going to test that. Ninja test, yeah. Okay, all passed. Let's install 64-bit version of that and rebuild for 32-bit. Right, so that's the 32-bit built. We can now install that version. And that's complete. And move on to GLFS lang. Okay, that's done. Let's run some tests. That's all passed, so I'm going to install now. And build for 32-bit. Okay, that's complete. So now I'm going to install that. And that's finished.